Good evening, everybody, those here at the faculty and those at home. We are very happy to get started with another edition of the BK Talks, today, November 3rd, 22. The name of our BK Talks today is Don't Panic. I hope that you all understand what we mean by that, and this is an issue that is raising quite a lot of attention in the last times, and this is why we decided to talk about the careers that you can pursue with a design degree. In short, what is it that you're going to do after you get your master's? So in order to do this today, we have Ifra Arif here. She's the moderator of the panel. She's a master's student. She also collaborates with us at with the organization of the public programs, and this was actually her idea. So we are following her orders tonight. She will be moderating, and we will try to, let's say, unfold what options there are and what is that you are supposed to be encountering once you finish your master's. I started by doing a little research on what is it that the website of our faculty says about what is it that you can do when you finish masters, no? So you can be designer, interior designers, urban planners, independent architects, and you can work for the government in the education and research. You can own your own business, be employed by agencies specializing in landscape architecture, etc., etc. You can work in development companies, real estate investors, housing associations, etc., etc. I hope that with this information that you read when you start your studies, you also see that there's a large array of possibilities once you finish what you are doing here now, which is being educated, no? But today we want to expand a little bit this array of options. We want to look at other ways of developing our profession. That's why one of the things I initially did when I met with Ifra and Lex when we were preparing these BK Talks is to simply type what is it that other people has done after studying architecture or design studies, no? Then it was funny because immediately we find that you can become a rapper, no? And then this is what Ice Cube did. He is actually an architect. You can be an actress, just like Ashwarya Rai. You can be an actress like Courtney Cox, or become an actor like Samuel L. Jackson, or you can be a musician, just like Roger Waters, or a singer, just like Seal, fashion designer and film director, like Tom Ford. He also studied architecture, but then he did something very, very different. You can even become the president of the United States with your architecture studies, and that's the case of Thomas Jefferson back in the 18th century, one of the founding fathers of the United States. You can also be queen. I just found out that actually Queen Noor of Jordan has an architecture degree. Finally, you can be something else. I don't know how to qualify or how to call him, but you can be an architect and be Benjamin Netanyahu, for the better or for worse. But anyway, this is what you can end up doing when you have an architecture degree. In any case, I mean, besides the kind of funny way of understanding what is that we can do when we finish architecture, or let's say when we have a design degree, today we would like to look at more seriously with the help of Ifra and the help of Pedro, Margarita, David, Hans, and Eline, what is it that we can do when we finish our masters here. I'm going to give the word to Ifra immediately. She will introduce better the panelists here tonight, and she will guide us through this conversation. I hope it's an interesting conversation, and I hope that those here on the tribune do participate and ask questions. Take the chance of asking questions, please. The microphone is here. So, Ifra, please go ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Javier. Well, good evening, everyone. I hope you're all well, and thank you for taking the time to join us tonight. Tonight, I'm taking the opportunity to call this a networking / soul-searching event for students like me who are quite lost in some ways and who don't really know what to do after they graduate. That said, I'd like to clarify who I am. I'm currently doing my graduation in architecture, and I'll tell you a little bit about how I got there, probably because it resonates with you guys a little bit. So I wanted to make nice models. I saw this at an exhibition once of Renzo Piano. I wanted to make nice models like this, and then like this also, out here in the Auxerre. And for some time, I kind of did. But then, you know, you go and you exit school and you go for an internship or something and you're just stuck at a desk and stuck with maybe samples and that's about it. And it can sometimes feel a bit underwhelming. So that's one thing. The other thing is finances, and which I tried to chart out quite crudely over there, but that seems to suggest to me that I will be in debt for the next 6 years, so that does not sound very promising. So let's get into the business of this for a moment. And I'd like to ask you guys to raise your hands if you guys are considering changing careers or have ever considered changing careers. Anyone? Okay, a few hands. Nice, nice. Well, I'd like to assure you, you guys are not alone. In fact, you guys are backed up by a study that was published somewhere online on Google Scholar. I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of the journal. But basically, it's a study of about 350 graduates of architecture from China. And however, it charts kind of their careers. And you know, some of them moved away from architecture. And it cites all these different reasons for their disillusionment. For instance, they were unable to find a job, they were unsatisfied with their salary, they worked overtime, they lost interest, they had a new career that was perhaps more attractive, and they were a bit pessimistic about the future of their career. Sounds familiar? Well, that said, it's encouraging, I think, to think that those of the respondents who moved away from architecture found that, well, most of them found that architecture actually helped them in their new career. A lot of these people ended up in real estate. Some of them ended up in animation, artificial design, industrial design, photography, pastry cooking, and gardening. So there are a number of avenues out there for us if you are deciding you don't want to do so much architecture or so much built environment stuff. Great. So I asked myself, what could I do with a design degree? Well, maybe I could do data visualization. I could be a sustainability consultant, maybe. I could be a product designer, photographer, or I could run away to the mountains, buy a plot of land, develop it, make a hotel, earn a lot of cash. That could be one option too. So I digress. That's not the point of this discussion. The point is for me to represent the students here at TU Delft and ask the question, well, what can BK's students pursue with their design degrees? And with that, I would like to introduce my panel here today. We have, firstly, Pedro Daniel Pantaleone. Pedro graduated from architecture last year, and he has since been working at Studio Ossidiana and has also been running his own architectural art and design practice with a friend. We then have Margarita. Margarita joined, well, Margarita studied architecture and then worked as an architect for a few years, but then after that decided to open a furniture maker's studio, and that has been going for almost 20 years now, right? Very nice, yeah. So we have Margarita, then we have David. David is here. No doubt you've seen him at other events around the faculty here this week with regards to formal methods in architecture. But today David is here in his capacity as an urban planner and as an academic. He is the head of urban planning at Matosinhos municipality in Porto, Portugal. And he is also a researcher and a an associate professor, if I've got that right? Assistant professor. Assistant professor in urban planning. Yeah, and then we have Hans, and no doubt those of you who have engaged with BK Launch and with the MBE know Hans. Hans has quite an illustrious career, I would say. Having done his bachelor's, not his bachelor's, sorry, his master's, in fact, in civil engineering. So not from an architectural background, but nevertheless very interesting because he then decided to come slowly into architecture, but more so in the managerial and construction management aspect of things. And lastly, we have Elina. Elina is, well, Elina's background is in interior architecture, but now she runs her own studio, which actually produces moving images, so animations and visualizations. So I would like to firstly thank all of my panelists for being here today, and I actually asked all of them to send an image or a video to describe or to something that represents something that they're proud of in their careers. And with that, I would like to ask Pedro to explain what he submitted.
Hi, hello everyone. Yeah, so this I submitted is Hedon, which is a sculpture that we built during a not residency 6 months ago. And yeah, maybe not proud, but it's something I did in which I see somehow the nice crossover between architecture, art, sculpture, and yeah, even engineering, because this is a hydrogen device that effectively produce hydrogen and explodes it. So in the way it's like a bit confusing to me as well. Yeah, I find it interesting and kind of represents what I want to push more through the studio. And yeah.
Thank you. Next, we have Margarita's video. It's going to play now. Oh, sorry. Oh, no. It should play. Ah, it's not working. No. Okay, that should work.
To talk at the same time, but I will try. This is an example of our work in Shin de Salmerón. We are two partners, Christoph Schindler and myself, and we are architects. We still consider ourselves architects. We never left architecture, but we focus in this scale, that is the furniture. And we call our work Möbel Architektur, so furniture that has to do with the rooms, with the architecture objects that are in. And that's what we do. We design and produce furniture, but we work together with architects to furnish specific needs of specific rooms and buildings.
Thank you so much, Margarita. Next up, we have David's drawing.
Well, I like to sketch tracks and to play with perspective and to imagine paths and opportunities that we can navigate through. So this sketch is a little bit a position and a statement regarding how you can be in life, ready for navigate for what you can achieve and the opportunities that you can have. So I think this was a proper starting element for discussion.
Thank you so much, David. I mean, very much on theme. And then on the other hand, we have this from Hans.
Yes, thank you, Ifra. This is our glass house, our south glass house here in the faculty building. And I'm especially proud of it because in 2008 I've been responsible for the whole relocation of our faculty to this beautiful building. And what you, in fact, here see is that my professional career and academic career comes together. And we have relocated the building in half a year, using a lot of materials, working in a team with many famous architects, with contractors, with suppliers. So this was really a fun project to do. So that's why I'm proud on this picture.
Thank you so much, Hans. And lastly, we have a video from Elina.
Yeah, you just saw a very fast edit of the Green Metropolis movie. This was a pilot for a future exhibition, possibly. The Green Metropolis film is an example of a project where collaboration is very important. And in this case, it was a collaboration with the Y Factory, the Naturalis, a museum, fashion designer Iris van Herpen, and me. And for me, these are the most interesting projects because you can create new things and new outcomes arise, and together you create new possibilities. And I also like to show this movie because here everything is brought back to its essence and it's very abstract. And nowadays we are used to highly detailed, realistic animations and visualizations. And I like to find out new ways in visualizing projects.
Thank you so much for that, Elena. Well, on that note, I would actually like to start by asking you how and why you reached the point in your career that you're at now. And just for recap, so you started off with interior architecture, right?
Yeah, actually, already during my study, I was very interested in things you could do with the computer. And back in 1994, it was not common to work on a computer. And I went to New York on an exchange program. And I studied there, and they were much further with the development in the computers. And there I got really fascinated about things you can imagine and think about and translate in images. So when I came back, I started learning all these 3D programs and worked very hard. There were no studies, so I had to do it all myself. And at that time, I met my future business partner. So we worked together, and that really helped for developing all the skills. And our first project actually were the VR worlds for the saltwater pavilion at Neeltje Jans in 1997. And that project opened all new doors. So I went to Winnie and Maas at the MVRDV for a talk about the new projects, and I showed him this, and he was immediately convinced. And then we did the Metacity Data Town project, a panoramic video installation where Margarita also worked on. And that was the starting point, and it continued, and from the one came the other, and that's how I'm still here.
Thank you. Pedro, I'd be interested to hear what you think about this kind of idea of obtaining new skills, because basically what Elena said was, graduating and then having to acquire a lot of skills that were not taught to you in university. Have you felt that so far?
Yeah, I mean, most of the skills that are kind of talked about, and I say, oh, it's nice that I know how to do this. They were not taught to me in the university, actually. But I guess they come from either, learning from others or like self-taught, but with the baggage of knowledge that I acquired during the 5 years of studies as a structure. Mm-hmm. And of course, like knowing how to make a drawing and using softwares and things like that, for sure. But most of the things that I guess like allow me to do these two things at once and somehow make it work are not even skills, they're just some hunches and guesses, and so there's a lot, like mostly you need more than what you think you have. And then it's just surprising to, and when you learn it, it's nice, and she built the whole career out of it, so that's great.
Hans, would you like to comment on that? Because of course you teach at the faculty as well.
Yeah, so there's a lot to learn, and some things you can learn at the university, some general things, some basic things about the profession, but also kind of attitudes and general skills, and these are really important for your future career as well. And then it's starting to go to work in practice and to get experience and to feel and to see what you like, and then continue and learning more, going back to the university, to a summer school, or so it's when you develop a curriculum for a school as us, then you always have to make your decisions about what is mainstream, what is really important, what has to be known by every student, what has to be known by students in certain tracks. The management track is different from the architecture track and the urbanism track. And then, yeah, there are also some skills and knowledge we can't contribute because we only have 5 years, which is still a lot, of course.
Of course, yeah, but I mean, it's interesting you mentioned that because, well, I think the question then for me to you would be, how did you find yourself within a kind of designerly academic field from a very engineering-based field?
Yeah, so I started as more as a design/engineering. From civil engineering, it's much more mathematical than design. But then during my graduation, which was focused on fluid mechanics, so it's a completely different topic, I already concluded that I was much more interested in practice, in how projects were, how companies work, etc. So that was for me the reason to start my PhD. And then combining the knowledge from the PhD with my civil engineering background gave also the opportunity to start my consultancy firm and to start as an assistant professor at Eindhoven, and then you develop more experience, you develop more knowledge, and then at the end you can combine things, and then it's getting really interesting. Yeah.
Nice. And this is a question that I'd like to, anyone is welcome to answer actually, and I realize, well, you guys have all, in some way or the other, changed direction from the original architecture, interior architecture, civil engineering. Was there kind of a eureka moment that you guys had when you made a transition, or was it a very slow burn? Yeah?
Well, for me, I don't feel that I broke with architecture at all. I don't have the feeling that I left it. I just decided for a very specific scale, this furniture scale. You can read it as a small architecture objects. You can read it with the same static principle. You can read them with the same material questions, with the same way of developing the projects. We design furniture the way we used to design architecture when we did architecture. So it's a kind of a specialization, and I love it, and I think it has lots of positive points. For example, the projects are much more smaller, so you have the control. The projects are much faster because they're smaller. The projects are self-payable, so I can design and fabricate my own prototype without having to wait for somebody to want to build an apartment block or a hospital. So you're much more in control of what you're doing. But I still think about my work in the same term of designs and principles as I used to think when I was in an architecture phase. So it's a change of scale only.
Okay, and what about you, David, and the other way around?
Same reason, same change of scale, but on the other way. My background is on architecture, but my interest is in a different scale. So then after I graduated on architecture, I started to have a different level of studies. And I did my PhD and my postdoc in urban planning and urban morphology, but it's a very similar reason, but on the other way. Maybe because of the complexity of the issues regarding with the planning and urbanism, that I find it more interesting that the detail scale, as she was mentioning. So it is the focus, the different focus, but the same reason, if you want. And then the possibility also to have an impact on a bigger impact from what you do in terms of the amount of people you reach with your work. So that was also something that pushed me in this direction of try to do work on urban planning and urbanism, etc.
Fair enough. With the exception of Pedro.
Can I add something something to this?
Absolutely, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. Like, I didn't see in any of these things like a clear rupture. But also, when I was watching, especially your work and then the video, maybe I'm heavily biased because I know that both of you studied architecture. But like, you know, you see it and you can tell that it's someone that had a, you know, a spatial or architectural sensibility that made that. You know, especially the animation actually. So, and I think that adds to my previous answer about the skills being more of a sensibility that then you can like apply basically everything, like down to the cooking, and you know, like someone cooks and you can tell that he's an architect by the way he cooks that pasta, you know. So, well, for me, there's never a rupture, and yeah, that was kind of also the point of the image that I wanted to show, to say that it's kind of confusing and fluid in that way, and I think everyone here is somehow on that path of crossover. Yeah, no, yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going to start hitting upon a bit of a thorny subject, and that would be to do with any, well, this is a concern that a lot of us people who are graduating soon will have, and that is to do with the work conditions that we will be confronted with once we graduate. And I think it would be super interesting to hear what sort of challenges, you know, no matter how banal, what sort of challenges you guys were confronted with once you left school. Hans?
Yeah, that's a really long time ago. So that was not the euro. We were not talking about euros, but guldens. You showed a nice picture of my career, the professional line and the academic line. So I did my PhD and at the same time I started my company. But talking about money, we had to find a loan from the bank to start the company. And so that was quite special, because you don't know what is going to happen in the years after that. Or wasn't that not your question? The problems you encounter was your question, wasn't it?
No, I mean, of course, like, the thing is, when you study architecture, the stories that you get fed are not so much about immediately starting your own business per se. And of course, for that reason, we don't get to hear about these narratives about, oh, we have to, you know, get a loan, and financial insecurity. So this is very important for us to hear.
But I think it's really depending on where you're going to work. So when you're going to work at an architectural firm, please ask for a regular salary. That would be my first advice. And I think that it has changed for the best, for the good, during the last 10 years. And maybe it will change again. You never know. But there are also a lot of other possibilities to start as a designer in the built environment, or as an architect. You can start at a real estate company. In your presentation, it was already there. And then you also can use exactly the same skills and competences as an independent architect. So my advice also would be to the students: think about what your possibilities are, what you're able to do, what are your skills, what is your drive, and then there are a lot of possibilities. Even in my company, what was a classical, traditional project management company, we hired architects. There were a lot of architects working in my company because they can visualize, they can have a holistic view on problems. They think about solutions. They are solution-driven. Ideation of certain situations. So the skills you learn at this faculty are much more applicable than only being the traditional architect. So please be aware of that.
Thank you so much for that, Hans. But I guess on the other hand of the question that I was asking, maybe not so much to do with the entrepreneurial side, but more so if you decide to enter a job, for instance, you know, what sort of challenges did you guys face when you started? Maybe Margarita wants to say something?
Yeah, well, we can also relate to ancient history. I also knew the guilders at that time, but I think my advice for you would be respect yourselves. I think that's super important. I mean, You have skills, you have personality, you have interests. You can go and work for somebody that interests you, in topics that interest you. Just find something that brings you something. But that doesn't mean that the price you have to pay are sleepless nights, no weekends. That's out. That's really not okay anymore. I think we went through that. And I think there was a time when that was allowed, but respect yourselves. It's like, if your job is killing you, then look for a better one. Maybe you don't have to start in a company where you visualize that you're going to stay 20 years. You can also try different things. Maybe it's also interesting to do some kind of working experience within the years of your career, to do a stop now and then, to skip a semester, to try a stagiaire job, to come back. I think that getting a bit of practice in the middle of the studies is also quite interesting, and then you come back and learn a bit more and go again, but maybe you don't have to stay in your first 2-3 jobs forever. Respect yourselves.
I would like to add to this: respect yourself, believe yourself. That's as much as important as respect yourself, because believe yourself will give you the perspective to change, because you know that change will bring you something better than what you have. So respect and believe yourself. And don't fear change. I changed a couple of times the track of my career, and it is okay. Changing is okay. It's something that happens. No drama on that. And the thing is to believe that will be a nice step to give. As in the drawing, it's another track that you can follow. So let's do it. Let's navigate through it.
Thank you. Elena, would you like to say something about that?
Yeah, I think you have to believe in yourself, but you also have to work very hard to reach the goals you want to reach. Especially in the beginning, I worked very, very hard, many hours. I didn't stop working, and I really liked it because I really was convinced this was the thing I wanted to do. And then it's okay, but sometimes you have to take a little bit of rest and listen to other people around you when they tell you are going too fast and work too hard.
I want to move the discussion to Pedro, actually, but before I do that, I'd actually like to ask you, how do you know when, this is something that you definitely want to pursue? Like, is it a kind of intuitive feeling?
Yeah, you feel it.
Literally
There's
you
no
feel it.
question about
No
it.
question.
For me, I was completely convinced this was the way, what I was going to do. I think I lost it now a little bit, so that's something else. But when I first started, it was no doubt. Yeah.
I will get back to that, but Pedro, what has your experience been like in the year since you've graduated?
Oh, yes, very, very nice advice from you guys. Thank you. Believe in yourself. No, pretty much like Elena, you have to work a lot. Like, but previous question was like, how is it like? And it depends on what you want to do, no? So there is jobs out there, and they're nice, and hope, thank God we went past that culture, so it's actually not a thing anymore. So, you can, you can pick and choose pretty much. And to be honest, in respect to where I come from, Italy here is way better, so it's okay. But then coming down to what I'm trying to do, which is kind of inspired by a drive, pretty much like you were saying, and like, I want to do that, and I do it, for myself, but also for others. I don't know, I do believe in it. And then, we were talking with Hans before, just briefly, and pretty much the prospect is that if you want to start independently in the first 2-3 years, you don't make profit, basically. So it's just you have to split yourself into people and like do double as much as the work. So yeah, it's a lot of hard work, but it does pay off. And yeah, very much aligned with what you said, actually, because you do it, if you do it that way, which is hard, you do it the hard way, then you need to like it. And then it's fine. And when stuff happens, it's great. So, yeah.
Nice. Well, would you like to say something, David?
Yes, I would like to add something that it was missing from what I said. Respect yourself, okay? Believe yourself, very good, and work a lot, very good. Nevertheless, you can be sure you will fail. And the thing you need to do after fail is to, yeah, okay, I failed, and yeah, let's move on. The work is there, of course, but the risk to fail is always there also. And the awareness of that risk and the need to suppress that moment when we fail is also as important and as respect and believe and work, etc. And of course, if you are good at what you do, it also might help a little bit.
Thank you. That kind of raises an interesting question in my mind because, of course, right now we've been having this really nice feel-good discussion about, believing in yourself. So what I want to ask you guys is, what, if you could remember one key moment where you felt like, oh, shoot, I've really, really, really messed up now, What could you tell us a little bit about that? And then how did you, bounce back from that?
Well, I truly believe in myself. I truly respect myself. I really work hard. And I had a huge opportunity as head of department at Nottingham Trent University. I was there for 6 months. And I resigned because I couldn't handle the job, the move from Portugal to the UK. So I failed. Actually, I failed. I had the best opportunity in my life. And I failed. And yeah, so what to do? As I said, there will be a moment that you will fail, despite you have the best conditions, the best everything, but you fail. So yeah, to answer to you in a very direct way, yeah, I had this huge opportunity, and no, so it happens.
It happens,
Yeah.
indeed. Hans, would you like to reflect on that?
Yeah, life is not always good. So sometimes you're happy, sometimes not. And I remember in my case, when I applied for a position as a full professor, that was in 2005, then the company was still going strong and I needed a lot of time. And then you start here, and then you have to combine these two challenges, and that was really difficult. You were talking about working hard. Working hard at the university, there you work hard. I think the teachers here in the room can agree with me, because you have a lot of deadlines, you have a lot of challenges, and then when you combine this with your company, then yeah, that was quite a challenge 15 years ago. And then you have to make decisions. So don't wait, and then you feel that it's not going right, what you said, and then you make your decision. Make up your mind, and then you change your direction a little bit. That's what you have to do. So if things go okay, and when you are happy, then continue, whatever you do. If not, change your plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Anyone else want to make any comments on their biggest failures?
It's hard for me to think about a big failure. I think my biggest failure was to work too long with my business partner. So that is something, yeah, you just keep on going and continuing, and sometimes it's not good. It's better to just quit and go in a different direction. Yeah.
Margarita?
Particular failure, but a dark feeling that maybe is also interesting is like we never made a business plan. I don't recommend that, but I don't think we're able. And if we look back now, or if I look back now, we started extremely naive to foreigners in a sector that we didn't study. Actually, we're making furniture, not architecture, with no network. And we decided, yeah, let's do that. It's a very good idea. And of course, it was very hard. And of course, the amount of naivety that you need to implement to not having a good perspective was big. But if you find your passion, it's your life. Just try, just follow it. And if you're a bit lucky, because of course another of the key issues is that you have to grab every opportunity by the neck and use it. Mm-hmm. If you're lucky, then you will succeed. And if not, you will learn something.
I think when you're not naive and you think too much, you're never going to start.
Well, I'm working since a year, so no big mistakes so far. But yeah, no, my thesis project was called an architecture failure. So like I was on it, and yeah, I mean, it's just little anecdote actually. I wouldn't consider it a mistake, but at a certain point, actually, I wanted to do for my graduation stuff like that I showed. Like I said, like that's gonna be my graduation, and then my beloved tutors, very nice comment, were like, "You're not gonna graduate then." So that was like 2 months before, and I was like, "Oh, okay, hold up, let me do some buildings then." But yeah, that was naive. That was very naive because they were completely right, actually. Mm-hmm. So. And I just wanted to kind of radicalize even more what I was doing, but it wouldn't have worked out. So yeah, no, actually a mistake. Yeah, my mistake on that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we're touching upon something here, and I think Hans mentioned this, David mentioned this, and it's about doing too much, right? And recognizing when you're doing too much for yourself. And of course, I think a lot of us in the faculty tend to subject ourselves to maybe some, much more work than perhaps we can take. And I wonder if any of you would like to reflect on that a bit further.
I think it's very personal, so it's depending on who you are. But for me, when I'm awake in the night, then it's too much. So for me, that's an important signal that I have to change the plan. Yeah, serious.
Yeah. Okay. So that's when we should start telling ourselves.
So when you're more thinking about the travels, than the opportunities, then you have to change the plan. Yeah, that would be my advice.
Okay.
And if it's about the amount of work, I think that you have also to measure what does this work bring you. It may be that there's a time in your life that you have to spend lots of hours in something that is completely essential for you to learn, that is very interesting for you to learn, and then you know why you're doing it. It just cannot get to a common point where it's not bringing you anything, but it's exhausting you. You have to make a bit of a difference, a mental difference. What does it bring me, this intense moment?
I have some difficulty to manage this question because this is what drives me, and I have a passion to this. So not always it is quite clear for me when I'm doing things because it's work or I'm doing it because I just like it. And if I just like it, well, I keep on doing it, despite, as he said, sometimes in the night I'm not sleeping, but I'm enjoying. So it's difficult to have that clear mind decision. Well, now this is work, or now this is something you are just like to do. So yeah, for me, it's not that clear.
I think for everyone, it's personal. That's what I said first. But so everyone knows something which triggers that feeling, and be aware of that and be honest to yourself. So honesty is also important as belief and etc. Honesty too.
Yeah, for me, when it's starting to feel too much like work, then it's not good.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think then I'd like to maybe touch upon the title of this talk, Don't Panic. And maybe we should start talking a little bit about the more practical side of things, because I suppose they're a bit more manageable. I'd like to ask you guys, in the current position that you're in now in your careers, what and as a kind of reflective exercise, what has it been like in terms of financial stability, you know, your social life, work-life balance, as we've just discussed, and your kind of mental, physical, emotional health?
On all aspects you are naming, it goes like ups and downs. And I'm fine with that. But you don't have to panic, because you start panicking, then it's not good. But I need times when it's really high and never ending, and I also need some times to get some rest. And that's how it works. Yeah.
David, would you like to say something?
As for the panic, I do get the panic because, like, no, from them, because I had it, and maybe it's a little different. Like, I haven't even worked between my student years, like, just studied and then worked. So I was even more like, oh, whoa, what am I gonna do, no? But also from friends that did that, it's different, because then you can really close the chapter and then you're by yourself, and then, you know, so thinking about that is, it is scary, but it always goes fine somehow, you know, like, honestly speaking, like, panic is for other things. Like, we're all quite privileged, like, in this room, you know, like, there's some other things that people panic about that are fair enough to panic about. So in the end, yeah, it's fine. But for the things that you listed, financial stability, kind of, mental health, kind of. But you need to be a bit on you know, like, because otherwise, because actually, no, because this brings back, I think, to the question before about failure, doing too much, and because I think we need to risk a bit, and especially after you graduate right away, no, if you have belief and work and, like, you have all the cards in place, then you need to take a risk, and, like, you need to somehow also embrace the fact that you're going to make mistakes and probably change plans, as Hans is saying. I think I'm trying to summarize all the advice here. But and that brings that brings some sort of anxiety for sure, and that's not healthy. But kind of coping with that is healthy, I think. You know, because then what are you gonna do? Is you're gonna go for the safest thing, follow the money basically, which is the safest thing that you can do. But as far as I'm concerned, that's not fulfilling, and I feel like, honestly, I grew up with people telling me, like, you don't do architecture for the money. So, like, the people in here, like, they're all very motivated, I think. Like, everyone knows that it's a culture of, like, that goes from generation to generation. So so you need to take the risk and panic a bit, but it's going to be fine. And kind of dealing with that is the whole, is what keeps you sane, actually. Because otherwise, it's just it's boring, and that's way worse, I think. Yeah.
Resume of the situation is a personal decision. There are people that need lots of security, or there are people that need lots of, this is not a critic, everybody needs a certain amount of security or a mental amount of luxus, or there are people that need 3 cars, and there are people that have enough with a bicycle. So where's your passion and what are your goals is something that you have to decide yourself. But you show this beautiful statistic at the beginning, how many people with the skills of an architecture diploma went where, and you can also see how much a role security played in some of them or not. Yeah. So if you decide for the fun, if you design for the risiko, you are going to panic. Yeah. So it's just part of it.
Okay, interesting you say that. Well, I think well, maybe a little reflective exercise here. If you were to, you know, somehow meet yourself a few years earlier, maybe this is not so applicable to you and me, Pedro, but regardless, if you were to meet yourself, say, you know, 10, 15, 20 years before, what advice would you give them, knowing what you know now? Elena?
Think about it a little bit.
Okay, no problem. David?
I will tell myself to sleep more. because sleep is very important for health. And I take a lot of hours to my sleeping hours, and now I'm paying the price for it. So I would say sleep more.
We should put out a little health advisory. Students, you must
Yeah,
sleep.
no. It's quite funny to have working nights in stuff that you like to do, but you also need to sleep. So it's really a health matter. So yeah, that's probably what I would say to myself: sleep more.
Fair enough. Anything anyone else wants to add?
Really tell myself not to panic. I think it's a fabulous title, and it's true. It's like, follow your gut, work hard, be focused, be flexible at the same time, but don't give up. Just don't panic.
The thing is, I feel like, I don't know, because as a student who is definitely panicking, I feel like the advice don't panic is a bit blasé. Like, it's like, you know, I am panicking clearly, but you're telling me not to do it. How do I not do it? What's there to it? What's the secret formula here?
Yeah, so my first question would be, why are you panicking?
Well, if I'm to give you, it's I'd have to situate myself a little bit more to explain. But basically, as an international student, you know, you have to firstly consider the very practical issue of a visa and being able to get employment at a place where they will be willing to sponsor your visa. Secondly, about finding housing, because of course we're in the middle of a housing crisis, and on top of having to find a job, it's like you have to find a house to live in also. So I think, I don't know, like I think there are sufficient reasons for me and for other students to be worried.
Yeah, I think that's what I see, and I have myself 3 children, and also in the master's age, so they have the same questions: housing, job, or an extra study, etc. But the reason to panic is when you don't see any solutions, and I think there are a lot of solutions for these challenges, I would say. And I think try to make it a challenge than a problem. Then the period of panicking, everyone has it, but try to use in a positive way to find a solution. And people studying at the university are intelligent, are clever. So I'm convinced you will find a conclusion. That's why the other panelists say, don't panic. It's even the title. But so I can imagine that's, wow, what should I do? But it's a kind of process you're going through. And I'm convinced that 90%, 95% of the students listening online or here in the hall, after a few years, they will conclude, yes, there was panic, but now I'm busy and I'm happy.
But okay, then we panic. We all do. But then when you identify what's your problem, and you did a very good analysis, then I think the next thing is you need to find your network. You need to ask for help. It's really not a cry of help, like get me out of here, I'm unable. It's just identify your target and go for it. Who has the housing? Who has the job opportunity? You have to build your own network.
Okay. That's very important, to able to ask for help, because all people are willing to help. And don't be afraid to ask.
Okay, that's a very interesting point you make about networking.
I like that word, network is really important.
Yeah, I did mention earlier on that I'm treating this as a networking event. But that aside, I'd like to ask actually then about your experiences with networking over the years.
I'm not so good at networking. That's one big problem. I have to be more out in the open and talk to people. I'm actually feeling the best when I'm sitting behind my computer and working and making animations. So that's something I still have to learn, but it always helps when you talk to people. Always new things come up. Yeah, that's something you have to be very active in. Yeah.
I was saying before that you cannot learn the network's key, and you just don't have them while you study. You know, it's a fact because you're studying. No, it's not true. You can build relationships with as you are doing, I believe. But Hans, she is.
Yeah, so so most students already start during their educational period with friends, with other students, with companies outside, architectural firms, go for an internship. So there are a lot of possibilities also during your study to start building your network. So I fully agree with you. It's really important.
Nice. And well, by extension, I think one of the main questions that's been tickling at the back of my mind is, if I decided that I wanted, or I say I, but I mean any student, if any of us decided that we wanted to become what you are right now, so an animator, kind of project manager and professor and urbanist, furniture designer and maker, and art design, architecture, what would you say to us? What are the skills that we need, and what are those kind of transferable skills from our design degrees that'll help us?
I would say just start doing what you want to do and what you want to become. Because if you don't start, for me, for example, if I didn't start learning these programs and making animations and showing them, then nothing will happen. So then you can keep on thinking you want to do something, but you have to start producing.
This is really a difficult question because 30 years ago, I didn't want to be a professor. So I think in a lot of cases it's not only making the plan, but it's also coincidence and what comes across your and what's happening and what's going on in your network. And yeah,
I would add attitude and luck. They are really important to get whatever you put the cross line. It's attitude and a little bit of luck and hard work, obviously always hard work, but also a little bit of luck and attitude and willing to move on despite all the things that you can find in your track. So for me that would be the sometimes more important than even the skills, because the skills you will learn with it, as she said, as soon as you start, the better. But sometimes it's the persistence on the skill.
I think that's the most important thing.
It's to be persistent. It's to, okay, I go this way, I go this way. I want to go this way. So to be persistent.
Okay, but the thing is, so far we've mentioned really, really kind of soft skills and much more personality traits than something I can put on a CV, for instance. So I guess my question then is, well, what would we have to put in our CV if we want to be you?
Well, I think if you find a field that really, really interests you and you're fresh graduated from school, maybe it's like get deeper in the field. Find out who are the people that are working there, who are the people that inspire you the most. Try to read about them, to learn about them, to work with them. Like, I mean, nowadays there's a lot of information about whatever interests you. Like Eileen started learning these 3D programs. Let's find the field that interests you and go deeper and find who are to be your mentors, who are to be your inspirations. Like if you want to be a furniture designer and you start already very well with an architecture degree, maybe what you need is to get in touch with the materialization. So maybe you go and do 6 months in a furniture factory. So you learn about materials, you learn about how you work with them in reality, you learn about connections, you learn because the field interests you. I think first you have to find your interest.
For me, these questions are a bit more difficult because, yeah, I don't have this like recollection of myself moment yet, but I would say what we're trying to do with studio method, and the reason why sometime it worked is because we feel a lot that architecture being a mixture of technical and humanities, right? Like we feel a lot the humanities through like reading a lot and doing a lot of research on the theoretical and philosophical side of things, and like I think that's key, and like it makes projects a little different. I remember also in uni, you could tell what kind of approach people had in that way. So I would say that, just like inform it with some human feeling, you know, like you're smiling a lot. Yeah.
Nice comment with the human feeling.
Yeah, well, that's what I would, yeah, to do that. So that means also overboard in other things, you know, like, yeah, I don't know, politics heavily and stuff like that. Yeah. They're important, so.
Okay. Well, I mean, you mentioned this human feeling, but then I'm also like, well, I realized that you're kind of doing 2 gigs at the same time, and it's like, well, how do you split yourself? How do you split your human feeling?
No,
there?
for example, like both, like Studio Siciliana as well. Like when I said comments about my work now, so far I was talking mostly about Studio Method and my own practice, but Studio Siciliana does the same. Like, that's why I work with them, and that's why it works, and that's why I like working with them. So, yeah, that's what I meant. So if you want, maybe you can ask them this question, and you will have a much wider time to look back to and give you an answer. But I feel like the same side of like this like care for humans, which goes through reading about history, goes through reading about psychology, sociology, like a lot of that. Yeah.
Elena, would you like to say something about that human element? Because of course you said you work a lot behind the computer. Yeah. So how do you feel that this human element plays into your work?
There is no human element. No, there is, of course. I think it's talking to people and stay in touch with others and talk about interesting topics and stay alive, go out and, yeah, learn, study interesting things. Yeah, that's an important thing.
Lovely. Well, I want to ask actually, both of you, Hans and Elena, because you're not strictly speaking in architectural practice now, and I wondered what your perceptions are of architectural practice, number one, but more so the building industry and the built environment as an industry.
And what's the question related to that then?
It's more to do with what sort of careers, what kind of industrial environment we will be kind of expecting.
A very competitive one, I think, but also a very influential. So buildings, infrastructure, it's really important. And in current times, talking about circularity, talking about sustainability, all the problems we have, the housing problem, you were mentioning it. So there's a lot of work to do. And that's what I also said half hour ago. I think for designers, there are a lot of opportunities, but then you have to be open and to see them. And for some of the students, it will be working as an architect, and for some of them, they will work as a designer in other kind of company, because there are a lot of companies involved in the built environment, in the construction industry or the building industry. So yeah, opportunities enough, I think. But that's not your question, is it?
I mean, in a way it is, but I was more curious about your perception as like, and I'm asking this in my capacity as an architecture student, but your perception of the architectural / built environment industry as a non-architect.
Yeah, then I don't think that I understand the question then.
I don't understand it too.
No? Well, maybe it's best if I set that question away anyway then. But in that case, I want to ask then, like,
What is your expectations for it? So maybe.
yeah, I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
No.
what's the expectation that you
Okay.
have? Yeah.
Okay. That's the question.
The expectation of a company hiring an architect. Yeah, that's depending on the company. So when in the past in my company in project management, when I hired an architect, in a lot of cases we didn't mention them as an architect, but as a designer or a project manager. But then we were looking for people who were able to find solutions, who were able to think about in a holistic way to problems, to visualize things. So in many big and complicated projects, it was always the designer with an architectural background who thought about the solutions. And that's the reason we hired also what you think, what you call the architect. But my advice to don't panic would be think about all the other possibilities as well as a designer. It's not, the built environment is not only about being an architect in a traditional architectural firm. See the opportunities. That would be my, that's my most important message. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think as a designer, you have the skills to think in a different way, and you can use that in whatever direction you go. And also for the animations and data visualizations of films, it's this way of thinking and understanding the project and translating it, what makes it go a step further. And that's why architects are very useful. And that's also my background in the way of thinking. I'm never actually say I'm an animator or a filmmaker. It's very hard for me to say what I'm actually am. Actually, I'm more a designer, or yeah, it's the way of thinking and dealing with problems and solving it. And then you can do whatever, making furniture or, yeah, the world is open for you.
But of course, the problems I think that we all are facing in this round planet are now really clear and in a way really critical. And I think that we as designers, we develop products, we shape the earth, and our responsibility is huge. So taking into account our skills and the things we learned, we also have a huge responsibility to give answers that are according to the moment that we're living. So I think we have to slow down. I think we have to take seriously the topics of materializations. We have to take very seriously the topic of how long is it necessary. The thing that we have already built through the centuries a lot, how much can we maintain, how much do we need? Urban issues are, at the moment, I think, crucial. I mean, when you think about Holland and the level of the sea, and I want everybody to sleep well, but I mean, the changes are coming, and our answers have to be really, really sharp because the problems are very big. I don't try to be negative, but it's not about fashion, color, design in a happy way or what is the next trend. It's about responding to necessities if humans have to make it through.
That's an interesting point. But before we proceed with that, I actually want to touch upon something Lina kind of mentions, and this is to do with labeling yourself as a particular profession. And I wonder if that's, obviously with Alina, it's a bit of a struggle. I wonder if the rest of us have that problem.
Yes, a lot. I teach, I do research, I work in urban planning, I sketch. I don't know what I am in terms of as a professional label, if you want. I totally agree with what she said about the attitude and the way of thinking. The way of thinking is the track that you have to do whatever you want to do and be comfortable in that track. So for me, it's more important this mindset regarding how to approach a certain problem despite of the scale. It is a furniture, or is a city, or is a movie, whatever. But it's this process that we learn in the university. In the beginning of the talk, we were discussing if we learn everything in the university. No, we don't. We don't need to learn everything on the university, but we need to learn how to think. That's the most important thing the university should teach to a student, is how to think. The rest, you will have time to learn. You go to the library, you live, you have experiences, he travels, he talks, whatever you want to do, you will learn. But the most important thing the student must end when he closes academic track is to know how to think. And then, as she was saying, you can do whatever, because you have a way to approach the problem, despite of the matter and the nature and the matrix of the problem. It's there for you to handle it.
And that gives an enormous amount of freedom. And
Yes.
I love that.
Yes, absolutely. You don't stick to a label. So yeah, my background is on architect, and I assume it as the enough label that I can have is, okay, I'm an architect. And then I do this and this and this and this and this, but it's irrelevant. On the ground, it's the architecture. It was the architecture program course that gave me the possibility to go through all these other, I learned to draw in the course. I learned to do research in the course. So those things, they were there from the beginning. So the rest it's life happening.
Okay. Any other comments on that? Well, in that case,
I'm thinking about your question now. So indeed, even after quite a long career, you still have the basic skills you learned at the university. So in my case, it's the analytical skills, the engineering faculty, and yeah, that's nice to have and important to have, and yeah, and to use and to improve it and to mature it, and then at the end you will you will succeed in a lot of different jobs.
You know, I was also thinking about your question. But, no, because I think this thing of what are you, and I think it's not that time anymore, right? It's much more like a modernist conception of society as a bunch of professionals, no? Like the architect, and like people made it proud of that, you know? It was kind of like you got a degree and you had a certain role in society. Whereas I think now we're much more like, yeah, as you said, I draw, I do this, and why is that not my work, for example? No, maybe because I don't get money for it, maybe, or like, you know, that what does it mean? But it's my drive, and that's who I am. So we're much more in the society of people, no? Like people want to just be people, and just want to be themselves. So, but that though makes it difficult when there's the market somehow, that the evil market, that is still pretty modernist in that sense, in the way that it does want to put a box, because of course, like stuff that you cannot label. You go to the supermarket, what is this? Salad, oranges, I don't know. No, what do you mean? You know, I have to know what I'm buying. So, and then there is a bit of a contradiction in terms of how I think culture is developing faster than the economy in that sense. And then, yeah, that is something I'm struggling with, for example, because in the design field, in the design work environment, like the fact that in the end you can always bring it down to a service, right, to a product. There is this kind of like exchange of a good that you use and it does something. And whereas in art, it's not really like that. And like, you know, it's much more mystical, the conception of what you want to buy art for. And then, well, the collaboration between these two things is very well known, and like there's people doing it since a long time, but how the time and the amount in which you can sell something from either of these is way different. And then you want to do both, and then what do you do? And yeah, it's a bit tricky there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You've touched upon, and this is something Alina mentioned earlier about freedom and about agency as as a professional, right? In the kind of framework of the market, and of course, some professions afford far more freedom, such as the furniture making, in the sense that you can make prototypes and stuff. For those who are, I guess, ambivalent at the moment with regards to that feeling of agency that they wish to have. What sort of words of advice do you have for them? How do you determine, or how did you determine that, okay, this is the amount of freedom I want?
I think for me it goes back to the comment on risks that I was saying, and I think, yeah, I guess our generation would just actually have the responsibility to be radical and to radicalize as much as possible the work that we do for obvious reasons, which is the general panic that is going on and that someone has to solve. So in that sense, because you have to risk it in that way, then yeah, you're kind of forced to be free, because then by risking it, you have to do your own thing. And I don't know, I'm very much pushing my own point of view here, I admit that, but that would be my advice, which is go risk, and that way you get freedom, but it's heavy to sustain,
No, but I think it's a very valid point of view. I think that there are people, and that's completely respectable, that they are completely happy in being employee in big companies, or to following a lead from somebody, or to being in a big team, and they're happy and they're successful and it's perfect. But if you decide the way of, I want to do my own thing, for me it was clear, I do not want to be a human resources manager, so no target in having 50 employees if it means that my life is about organizing their work. I don't want to be a peer manager, so if my work is about making advertisements of my products all day long, so that's also not what I want to design. So then you find your own balance, your own equilibrium to be able to do the things that you signed for. I mean, you took the risk, you took the panic, you took the responsibility, but then do what you wanted to do.
Yeah, you have to make the right choices which fits to you. And then you are free, I think. And if it doesn't fit and you're not happy with it, you have to make a different decision and go in a different path. And you have to find out by trying. If you don't try, you don't know it. Sometimes you don't know beforehand. Mm-hmm. And that's the risk you have to take. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to provoke a little bit of this discussion. It's the decision to be an orange on a box of oranges as to be a lemon in a box of orange. So it's something you have to choose. They are all the same family of fruits, but there's a little bit difference there. So that's the amount of risk you want to have, being a lemon in a box of orange or being another orange in a box of orange. So.
And I mean, and now what we're starting to talk about is a kind of assertion of our expertise onto the rest of the world, right? And well, I wonder what comments you have about that and how you go about it, and what advice you have for students who have very strong views and want to pursue them, despite maybe the rest of the world saying no.
Well, sometimes it's good to say no to the rest of the world, but it's always a decision that you have to take, knowing the consequence that you are going to have, because every time you say no, it's probably a door that you'll be closing, but you can then think that you'll be open a window. So it depends a little bit of your how much you are available for consider alternative tracks to your life. So again, the orange and the lemon depends.
Anyone else want to comment on that?
Okay. Can you repeat the question?
How would you, as you know, as you are, how do you assert your positionality, your opinion, your expertise on the rest of the world? You know, in a sense that, how do you assert that you are a lemon in a box of oranges? It's a difficult philosophical question.
Thanks for
maybe
repeating, but...
Maybe the lemon analogy I cannot really explain that well, but I think if you decided, if you're lucky enough to find something that motivates you enough to dedicate your work in life to, then be good, be the best you can be. Like, keep on learning, and then if you do that, and if you're good enough, then I think you will get the feedback. Like, people do not appreciate you because you really try hard to make an input. People appreciate you because they recognize your input has a validity. So have something to say if you want to be taken into account.
Yeah, and if you're really convinced you want to, in what you want to do, then you don't think about what the rest of the world is saying to you. You're just going for it and do it. I think that's a good advice. If you're really motivated, then it's not sure that it's going to work, but the chances are big because you don't stop. If it's getting hard, you just continue to set your goals and to pursue your dreams.
Wonderful. Well, I think we are kind of heading towards a Q&A session now, where I would actually like to invite members of the audience to come down to the mic and ask any questions if they have any for our panelists.
The first thing, I think this kind of headed towards a therapy session almost, with advice that can be applied both to the career and to our lives, right? First, I'd like to make a comment, and then maybe I'll ask more a practical question. I think careers you can pursue with a design degree is kind of narrowing already. And maybe if you think of careers you can pursue with an architecture degree or with a Master of Science degree, which is what we officially graduate as, then you open up a whole lot more of possibilities, and it's reassuring in a way. And I think design, I see it at least as one of the skills or one of the outcomes of the whole process. So maybe that's the first comment. And the question maybe towards David, I think you can answer a bit of how I ended up here. I'm Brazilian. I graduated already 3 years ago there. And in Brazil, we do the whole thing together, which means I'm qualified or licensed as an architect already. And I found myself at a moment which I would like to explore with different scales and maybe go more towards the urbanism side. And even though I graduated as an architect and urbanist, I found that I had no practical experience with that field. And I was torn between coming here and pursuing the urbanism track or the architecture track. And I wasn't sure if I would like urbanism so much up to a point that I would spend 2 years of my life specializing in this. So maybe my question is, when do you know to pursue, let's say, further qualification or to specialize? Because, well, you mentioned you have a PhD. It's a very large investment of time, money, energy towards something which I'm not yet sure of. And how did you know? You know, maybe that's...
I'm going to be completely honest with you. I did a PhD in urbanism for 5 years. And then I did a postdoc 3 or 4 more years. So it's about 9 years. Always studying urban planning, urbanism, spatial planning, whatever. When did I realize that this was something that I want to do? Well, maybe when I was designing the details of the first and only house that I designed. And I said, nope, I don't want to know how to design the detail of a door with a wall. So it's back to the beginning of the conversation. It's a perception of what you really want to do within the design universe. It's the scale that drives you, understand? So for me, the panoramic perspective over the problems, they were always much better than to look at the very tiny thing that really didn't drive me at all. So that for sure helped me to decide for an urban planner career in terms of academic. So that's why I decided to study it in a PhD in a postdoc, to have skills that I didn't have during my graduation, because it opened some perspective regarding the topic, but it wasn't, as in Portugal is the same. We have a degree that allows you to do a doghouse or a city. It doesn't matter. It's the same degree allows you to do that. But nevertheless, I felt that I didn't have enough knowledge to start to mainly approach the complexity that urban issues bring to discussion and to deal with. So in order to learn how to address that complexity, I felt the need to study more urbanism and urban planning, etc. But that trigger moment was perhaps when I was designing the house, and I said, this doesn't fulfill me, so maybe it's... Yes, I say that to me so many times. Sometimes I know more what I don't know, what I want. Sorry, sometimes I know better what I don't want than the things that I want. So that helps you to navigate through these strange tracks that life sometimes gives you, because at least the ones you don't know, you avoid them. The rest, it will be good for sure.
Thank you so much for that question. Well, actually, I want to extend that question over to Hans, because Hans, also, you did a PhD in civil engineering and management sciences, isn't it? And I guess my question by extension is, well, did you have this moment of feeling like, well, I don't just want to do civil engineering?
Yeah, so in fact, during my graduation time, I concluded the practice of construction and the management part is also very interesting. And then I concluded that during my civil engineering studies, there was nothing about management. So that was the reason to do the PhD. Yeah, and then finally you can start your company, you project management, consultancy, and then you learn skills and knowledge. So indeed, it's exactly the same.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience?
So, hi. So the students who are, let's say, graduating right now, they also graduate in a context of, let's say, a burning planet. And when you swipe on your phone, you see that there's a forest fire, there's this going on, that going on, climate change. So it's kind of a very daunting context. So my question would be, in terms of career advice, or let's say, do the students who graduate now have to consider that they have to save the planet, or how do you deal with that moving forward into your career choices? I know. But that's precisely the feeling that the students might have. No?
Yes,
So,
but I think it's not only the students, I think.
yeah.
Hopefully we all have that feeling, and I think the amount that every person can do is a personal choice. There's lots of things that you can do as an individual. hopefully the amount of things that governments or bigger institutions as persons can do is also big enough that we have a chance. I mean, I'm not really worried about the planet, and I'm not really worried about life in general. I think life will find a form. It's about us humans. It's about our chance to be here in a couple of more generations, and in which terms. And I do think that because we have decided for a career that shapes the planet in an urban scale, in a building scale, in a furniture scale, each one of us has to decide which kind of responsibility do we take. I mean, they can be simple things, what do you eat? Can be also simple things, where do you take your holidays and are you flying there? Or they can be bigger. There's no moment to make here a preaching what we should do, but definitely the questions are clear.
Yeah, I would say integrate it in your job and do what you can do within the context of it. And so what we currently see in students graduating in our studios, but also in the MBE department, they are really focusing on circularity, on all these kind of issues, of possibilities to cope with that big challenge. And also in your future job, think about what you think is really important and try to integrate it in your work, in your designs, in your projects, in your buildings, in your urban area. Do what you can, but that's the first step, I think.
So Hans, can I ask you, as a staff of the university, have you noticed in your job any changes in this respect in the last years?
Have you what?
Noticed any changes, or had you implemented any?
Yeah, certainly. So as we speak this week, we had a lot of discussions about what we have to change the coming 5 years in education, talking, for instance, about circularity. So today and yesterday we had some really interesting discussions, also panel discussions and workshops like this with teachers, with people from in the faculty, from other faculties, but also from companies and the government. What should education look like to cope with these big challenges? So we're talking about the 1 million homes project, what we need here in the Netherlands. We're talking about circularity. Water. So it's really a topic, and people are thinking about it to integrate it in education.
Yeah, but also in answer to your question, I would say that yes, they have to consider that, because honestly, like the whole talk on the career, while, as you said, stuff is happening the way it's happening, like feels a bit schizophrenic, you know, because it's like, oh, what is my life gonna be, and like, you know, and our generation just doesn't have that prospect somehow, you know. So it's like building up your future where all the facts on the table are telling you that it's not gonna be like that for like major reasons that you cannot control with all the hard work and everything. So yeah, the main thing is to take that into account, and that's what I was going at before with the risk and the you know, we need, because what we had before clearly didn't work out because it's led to this, so we need something radically different. And you know, so yeah, it's more of a societal discourse, so I have nothing against the people that do choose the safe path, as you were saying, but like, so not personally, you know, like, of course, like, I have many friends that did that, but like, you know, societally speaking, we need to change things like deeply. So, and by choosing the safe choice, how does that relate to career? By choosing the safe choice, like the big firm, the whatever thing that was doing the same thing that has been doing since hundreds of years, then, you know, like, yeah, it's not the way to go, maybe, you know, in terms of career. At least we need a mixture. We need a bit more of people who take risks and try to radicalize our crisis a bit and like making it something out of it. Then maybe we have a future.
Yeah, I wanted to respond to that because making the change, sometimes working in a big company can influence the world much more than in a certain freedom So it's depending. It doesn't mean that all the big companies don't have the right influences.
I would like to add that understanding what you are saying, I will try to remove it from the dark side, if you want, and to put it on the constructive side. Constructive in terms of driving, make it something that drives you forward. I mean, understanding that worry, that that notion of we have to do something, make it in. Assemble your perspective of the future in one of those fields. Understand that you cannot pick all of them because they are so many and so complex that you need to be clear in the track that you want to go through. But use it as a trigger motivation. Understand? It's not something for you to be with anxiety. No, it's something for you to fool you to yeah. Well, so if this is what is needed to do, so let's do it. Let's try to handle this, and that will bring you an expertise. That will bring you something specific. That will bring you something that it's a plus that you can add to whatever everybody else can offer to the market, to the companies, whatever. So they will recognize in you something that they will need because you will help them to make that change that is worrying you. So this is a feedback process. Yeah, we need a change. You need the change. So let's feedback these needs in a positive way and not bringing anxiety and stopping us for doing whatever. I have this huge cloud above me, and I'm not going to do anything with afraid that the cloud can drop on me. No, it's well, the cloud is there, so let's go.
Makes me think about a lecture I saw from Bruce Mao, and he was saying design. Let's say we can design our way out. We can. It is the most exciting moment to be alive because the problems are actually the biggest.
The challenges are huge. So, wherever you look, you have amazing reasons to start whatever you want because it will be useful. It will be good. It will help something and whoever. Just do it.
Thank you for that question. Any more questions on the table?
I think that if there are no more questions, I will ask one question. So because I would like to build upon this note of optimism that David is giving us. Maybe my students know that I'm not so optimistic or I have difficulties transmitting optimism, especially to the generation which is watching. And I would like to ask each and every one of you, do you feel optimistic about the future? Not our future, I think we are already good, no? Let's say. About the future of the generation we are talking to. I know it's difficult because I have difficulties as a teacher to transmit optimism. So I'm asking for help here. You need to come here. It's the game.
I'm just wondering if your difficulty to transmit optimism is also a difficulty to, well, read a positive approach from the future generation. Like, do you look at the generation you're teaching and maybe you're not so confident that the new generation is able to take on the new challenges?
No, that's not at all what I mean. What I mean is that the challenges that you are mentioning are really, really big and that we need to face them. But I do also, I'm going to be looking at them if you don't mind. I'm also realistic, and we know that it's a very difficult period. So I have problems transmitting and telling the students, yes, it's going to be fine. yes, it's going to be good. Just go ahead and do it and believe in yourself and work hard, etc., etc. Everything that we have heard today, which is really positive. But sometimes, and this is in a way a provocation, I have a lot of trouble believing and transmitting that. Believe in yourself, work hard, and everything is going to be fine. And this is a little bit of a therapy session, actually, as you mentioned earlier, no? But I really have difficulties as a teacher, as an instructor, to transmit optimism to my students when we are in front of what we are. And this is something, I think we need to be clear, no? We are fucking it up. It's you know, I don't know whether to call it apocalypse, because I wouldn't to go, but I already mentioned that, and we keep reading and listening and hearing, no? So for me, transmitting optimism is a very difficult thing. And whenever I hear all of you say, believe in yourself, you can make it, work it hard, etc., etc., I really would love that I can do the same. Sorry, this is maybe a comment, not a question, but I would like you to maybe also talk about that, no? Because we are in a faculty, Technical University of Delft, with a very, very, very deep belief that technology, Technical University of Delft, is going to save us. And this is somehow, sometimes, what we let students know, that technology is there and technology will produce solutions. And frankly, personally, from another point of view, cultural, social, or political, sometimes it's difficult for me to believe that that's going to happen. So what do we do now? How do we keep transmitting that optimism? Or maybe, how do you do that? Now I have a question, not a comment. I hope that works.
In my classes, I always try to focus on the students as a group, but also in the individual student. And I really believe that this generation can do their best and will do their best, given the knowledge and the skills they have, but they can't change the world in their own. That's true. But that doesn't mean that they have to be optimistic about their own influence. So that's what I try to teach. So yeah, I'm still optimistic about our students, Xavier. Yeah.
I would also like to participate in the therapy season. I mean, you're talking as a teacher. I'm talking now, sorry about that, but as a mother, I have 2 teenager kids, and how do you explain to them everything is going to be fine? Well, mine decided, a bit like Pedro, and I like your perspective a lot, not to believe that everything is going to be fine, and to decide, well, you guys are not doing it right, so we're going to do it differently. So from your questions, your direct question, what do you do? In a personal level, I'm not putting myself as an example. This is a therapy session. I'm sharing with you I'm not flying anymore. I'm not eating meat anymore. In our company, we changed our standard wood to a wood that grows locally. All our producers have to be reached by train and not by plane. I think that sometimes it's important about talking about very small things. What I'm saying are super small things, but just the hope resists in the fact that you can do things. So do what you can, because it's important and everybody has to do, but be radical enough to put in question the big infrastructures are not doing enough. I'm not talking about one or the other big companies, but the things that need more time to change have to change faster, because we don't have the time to wait 20, 30 years and see what happens. So I think we have to be critical and say, this is not the way, and we have to do changes in a personal, in a business, but also we have to require from our authorities to move faster.
I think, straightforwardly, what you're doing is right, because, like, I think it does come down in the end, like all the problems that we have. Actually, it is a fight, or they are caused somehow by this kind of inherent optimism of that our society had so far. No, that is like a reckless pursuit of pleasure, basically, that is constantly growing. And at a certain point, we realize that, oh, whoa, maybe we don't have you know, the gas tank at a certain point runs out. So this kind of like faith in always being able to improve your condition, and on the other hand, actually avoiding discomfort as much as possible, and kind of repressing a whole like field of, yeah, human life basically. So that's crazy to me, and so I think that not communicating optimism necessarily as an only drive for the future is a good thing. That doesn't mean though that, because then on the other hand, like the discourse on this gets polarized in either you're enthusiastic and optimistic and you faith technology and everything is going to be fine, or you're completely nihilistic and you're going to die and whatever. But then there is a third way that basically tries to make the first into the second one just by embracing the fact that drastic things are going to happen, but, you know, like in pretty much what you were saying, you know, about the cloud. And so it's about embracing negativity in a positive way somehow, like, you know. So that's a kind of, and I don't know how you communicate that to students, like good luck with that. But mere optimism for the sake of, I want to live good, is what led us here, you know, like somehow. So we should avoid that, honestly. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with this idea that optimism per se is quite limited in terms of the things that you will be able to achieve with it. But this perspective that you can have a role, that you can play your own part, as he was saying, in all these questions, despite of the complexity that these questions can have, but for instance, doing these small things, is a starting point. The risk of not having optimism, a critical optimism, is to allow things to go on as they are. And that, for me, is even worse that don't have optimism, understand? So when I balance both, I prefer the track of a critical optimism that at least drives us towards something, then zero, then nothing. And everything goes as it is right now. And if everything goes as it is right now, then we really have a problem. We already have one, but if we just let it flow, let it roll, that will be even worse. So for me, the question is not as much as you put, is yes, that is true. And the alternative is, if you know the answer for this, we'll go on discussing it. If you don't know the answer for this, you're good with the optimism, the critic optimism, not the nonsense, naive optimism, but the critic one. Say, no, you have a role. Let's play it. Let's try it. At least try.
Thank you so much for that. And I guess on that note of taking optimism, but taking it critically and not panicking, I thank you all for tuning in, and I hand over now to Javier.
Okay, well, thanks very much, everyone. Thanks to the audience here and at home for being here today. It was a nice and evolving conversation, so thank you very much to Pedro, Margarita, David, Ifra, Hans, and Line for being here tonight and for discussing what we have been discussing. I don't know if I'm a lemon or if I'm an orange, or if I was a lemon or an orange. That was a really interesting thing I've been thinking about for a while already. I knew that I was not so much of an orange, but I never made it to be a lemon. One of the things that I learned in the Faculty of Architecture when I studied was that, and this is something I think you mentioned, David, is that I knew or I learned what I didn't want. I didn't know what I wanted, but I knew very well what I didn't want, and this is what I learned from the Faculty of Architecture. No? I also had my eureka moment, I think you call it like that, eureka moment. Mm-hmm. And this is a little bit of a grandfather's anecdote, but maybe it's helpful. I started my studies at the Architecture School of Madrid. And then you were meant to be a practicing architect. That is what you were meant to be, for sure. It was written there. And there was this lady outside the cafeteria of our faculty, There was this lady in the 1990s, very, very early 90s, 1990 actually. She would be there with a small table selling books and selling one magazine which is called El Croquis, I guess that you all know. And there, I told myself there are ways out different from being a practicing architect. Since then, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I was sure that it was not necessary to be working or end up working in a big architecture offices once you finish once you get your architecture degree. I don't know if this is any piece of advice to all of you watching from here or from home, but I think we will let you know here at the Faculty of Architecture and the built environment what is it that you don't want to do, then do whatever, okay? So on that note, I would like to conclude. Thanks very much. And we invite you to come back on the 17th of November with a new BK Talks, a Planet of Bodies, nothing to do with today's conversation. We will talk about design with us for humans and other physics. And we will also open on that day, a few minutes before the exhibition with the same title. So see you all on the next 17th of November. Thank you very much and good night.